All right, everybody, check this out. I got my new special effects courtesy of FaceTime. So I'm ditching my jet for the time being. And I got to tell you guys, man, I upgraded my computer. I got a new Mac Mini, and I am just loving it. This thing is spectacular. You cannot get a better mid-range desktop, period. It is so phenomenal. All the activities that you can do with it. I can even do this. How cool is that? I can do like double cameras. Anyways, so definitely loving my new Mac. And that's right, you can also do this.
Impressive.
That's right. And loving my new guest, which actually technically, man, you are not a new guest. You are an old guest. And I say that respectfully because this is your second time around.
That's right.
You are
November 2022.
That's that.
November 2022.
Yeah, it's been a while, my friend, but I know we keep in touch, and
Yeah.
I keep promising to offend our audience with your presence once more.
Yeah.
So this time around, I was able to play some music because, folks, you probably don't know this, or maybe you remember from last time. Bob is a master musician amongst many instruments. His favorite is, of course, the drums, but he also plays a lot of other things. And in fact, Bob has a live concert tonight. How fun is that? So Bob's playing live, and I'm taking my wife out on a post-Valentine date to the High Museum here in Atlanta for Jazz in the Museum, where they have a jazz band inside of the amphitheater, inside of the museum, and you can walk around and absorb all the exhibits and really take your time, you know, with a cocktail. That you can't bring the cocktails up into the exhibits, but you can have a cocktail, listen to jazz, go walk around. Fun times. And you're doing this as a fundraiser, right?
Yes, I play with a local group called The Power of Music, and in fact, I'm taking my wife out for a post-Valentine's Day dinner tonight. She's playing keyboards in the band and is the musical director.
I did not know that your wife was also like, you know.
Oh yeah,
figure, right? Go figure.
she's as good as I may or may not be. She is the consummate musician. If necessary, you know, she could go fill in tomorrow at the Grammys or the Emmys or any of those shows.
Wow.
She can read and write conductor scores, plays world-class keyboards, sings. Yeah, she's pretty amazing. 28 years Canadian Armed Forces. She ran big bands and put them together. She's a formidable musician.
It sounds like both of us definitely are punching above our weight class.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely know I am.
Yeah, I lucked out that she said yes, and I'm very glad for it.
I had to beg and ask, like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 12 times. And I eventually just kind of wore her out, you know, basically. But no, it's good to have you on the show, man. I wanted to.
Great to be here, Shally.
Kind of circle back to some of the things we talked about last time, and also, you know, we've got some fun, interesting new things to talk about. And so, folks, if you have any questions, please participate via the chat. We do have chat active on any of them. We'll see your chats. I'll even put them up on the screen if it's funny enough or, you know, interesting. But anyway, so Bob Bachtold is a veteran of the industry, and when I say veteran, I mean you know, one of the people that I revere and admire for their depth and breadth of experience. And he has been recruiting for almost 4 decades. And is it true that over the last 4 decades, close to 4 decades, you have never placed anyone without talking to them? Is that true?
Well, let's qualify that. I have placed probably about a dozen or 2 people that I've only communicated with via online. So, for instance, let's call it, chat, you know, Zoom, those sorts of things, Google Meet, Teams, etc. Or in some cases, some of the younger folks out there who prefer texting, I've done a lot of texting. But yeah, our business is all about being a talent scout and a matchmaker. That's the core of the recruiting business. Whether you do the sourcing front end, full life cycle recruiting, even on the back end, it's all about the engagement we sit in the middle and we try to make things better for everybody. We find the talent companies need. We find people better jobs, more interest, more challenge, sometimes more money or comp. And and it's about making actually in that case sense a world a better place for people via how they work and where they work and what they create. And it's
That's definitely a noble view of our industry, and something that I've
yeah,
always held up. When I talk to folks about my foundation, the nonprofit foundation that I used to run, they asked me, "Well, why would I want to be a recruiter?" I said, I would say that there's a couple of reasons that you want to be a recruiter. One of them is if you're interested in business, there really is no better center stage seat in the entire corporation than the seat of recruiting, because you get involved with, if you're lucky and or if you stay in it long enough, almost every aspect of business. Some
absolutely.
recruiters totally specialize and just do technology and they never leave that. But I've done everything: locum tenens, nurses, legal, corporate, all of it. And I know more about business, at least how business works. Doesn't mean I'm a better businessman, but how it works than just about any MBA that you can point your finger at.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's all
That
about
is one
people.
reason.
Yeah, it's all
Yep.
about people. I
And
mean,
the other
almost every.
reason
Yeah,
is what you just said, is the fact that it really is a job that, if you do it correctly, can really improve people's lives. Switching jobs, if you're going from one job to another, really needs to be something that you're doing because it's a better position. Could be better pay, but it doesn't always have to be about the money. I've taken pay cuts to go to a better job because of the team, because of the challenge, because of the environment. But it usually is an improvement in some way, shape, or form. Now, if you're unemployed, getting a job doesn't necessarily mean it's an improvement on your previous. You might have just lost a job that you really loved, but the company, just couldn't support that position anymore. So yeah, it's not always going to be an upward trajectory. Sometimes you got to take a step back. But if you're unemployed, getting a job is still an improvement from being unemployed. So it's always a
absolutely.
step forward, right? So those are the two reasons that I think that just if it's selfish, you want to learn about business, there's no better place. If you have a bit of altruism, helping people and getting them into a job that makes them happier, wealthier, improves their career, whatever, is definitely a noble calling. But
Absolutely.
this
Yeah.
business has evolved considerably in my
Oh,
career and in your career, certainly. So that's what I wanted to kind of circle back to and talk about and kind of bring things back from our previous conversation. The evolution of sourcing. The evolution, I claim that I was one of the pioneers of sourcing. And the reason I can get away with doing that is because when I started in 1996, there wasn't really much of an internet to speak of. In fact, I had to connect to the internet via a dial-up modem from
hmm.
home, because there wasn't even a phone line in my office that wasn't part of the internal switch network, and those I couldn't dial out from. You had to have a separate line. So I literally was sneaker netting it on my little 5.5-inch floppy disks, sneaker netting from my office to home with resumes that I got off of online bulletin boards, right? But
Yeah.
you've been around, and you were a recruiter before that. So you literally went from recruiting to sourcing. So
Yeah.
tell us about the evolution of, like, when did internet recruiting really start?
Well, I like to claim I was one of the very first recruiters on the internet. As far as I know, I'm one of about a dozen people who was doing it back in the 80s.
The
I got
80s.
into
Okay.
I got into business in October '84. I got online in November '86 at my first in-house, wholesale retained in-house recruiting assignment. Prior to that, I was in the agency business for 2 years. I used to source basically from technical magazines. I started out essentially recruiting VAX VMS internal gurus, operating systems
I
people that were
used the
totally
VAX
vital.
VMS in
Yep.
college in the
And
80s.
right. And I literally made my business from one resume and a dead file and a stack of magazines. Literally, that's what I did. I learned the business from people who could make recruiting happen with a roll of quarters, a phone booth, and a phone book, and a pencil and pen and paper. That's
Maybe a
literally how
crayon
I
or
learned it.
two.
Yeah, yeah. And I got my first computer as a Macintosh Plus with a DataFrame 20 hard drive in November of '86, and I never looked back. I walked into the client that morning, literally with a hand truck with 4 legal-size file boxes full of notepads and resumes and file cards and all that contact stuff. And I got in, and I saw the internet live, and I said, I want to do that. Well, you need to spend this and buy this and get a Macintosh. It connects easier. And I went out that lunchtime to Computer Attic in Palo Alto, and I bought $3,600 worth of gear, and I would never look back.
$3,600 back then was like 36,000 these days in the shitty
Well,
economy.
yeah,
that we're in
pretty
right
close. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was primitive computing. One of my mentors, Dave Law, now long since retired, he's worked for everybody, was one of the guys who convinced me to get a Mac, because I could actually do the work on the Mac myself without having to learn PCs and all kinds of cumbersome stuff. I built my own database over the weekend, for God's sakes, in Borland Reflex.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the early days.
It's true
And
what they say. Once you go Mac, you never go back. I mean,
Well,
I got this
yeah.
Mac Mini now, and it's like I just I had a Mac laptop before, but it's a laptop. This Mini has so much more power in every possible way. I've been tracking this thing, man, not to geek out, but for the last full-on week I've been using it. It's only a week old, but full-on week I've been trying to throw everything at it I possibly can. I put widgets on here. I put multiple monitors, and the CPU has been at 5%. That's 95% idle, 5% utilization. I used my last laptop, which is a MacBook Pro, and it was at 50-60% all day long. And this thing is 5%. It barely. I can't even touch the computing power.
Yeah, my 2021 Mac that I'm still relying on, 64 gigs of RAM, the highest power Intel i9 chip in it. I haven't even gone to an M chip yet. I'm running it at probably 60 to 75% all the time at this point. I got to get a new one.
You need to get an M. I got an M2 Pro on this thing. The M2 Pro rocks. Definitely.
That's what I've heard.
It rocks hard. Absolutely. So, all right. So back to, you got your Apple Plus, and what did the web look like in 1986?
There was no web. The web didn't come about till '93. I was on the internet, technically the Usenet, which is a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
The internet basically started.
A lot of people on this call have no idea what you just said. So break that down for us.
Well, ARPA and DARPA founded the internet in the early 70s by the Department of Defense. It was designed as an alternative communication medium that could survive all sorts of calamities, tragedies, major, in nuclear war, all kinds of things. It was designed basically as a fail-safe communication network. And it gradually got adopted by the technology companies because a lot of them were participating with the DoD in this.
And by academic institutions.
Right. And the first company to really get it from the software and system side was the old Sun Microsystems. Now, of course, long since purchased by Oracle and been fully absorbed.
Java, that's Sun.
Right. Yeah, James Gosling and all those guys. But Sun Microsystems was the first company to understand. In fact, it is actually the byline on their sign in front of the main building. The network is the computer, because they understood the value of connecting all the computers together. That's the real value of the internet.
Fast forward, that was what year?
1982. I got in 84.
1982. I just want you to think about, you probably never thought about this before, but fast forward from the network is the computer all the way to today, and we're back there again.
Yeah.
What do you think cloud is?
Yeah. And
the network is the computer.
Of course. And the web actually started in beta form, essentially available in 1993. It went full live in 95 with Netscape. Prior to that, it was all beta level programs and stuff, and people trying things out.
And brown background.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's when things really took off. The web actually started. Most people also don't know this. The Usenet and the internet, until 1996, it was prohibited. You get blacklisted for doing anything commercial. It was strictly non-commercial. The company that blew it wide open, if you go back to the history books, was eBay. Why? Because they hosted auctions that they didn't actually sell or buy and sell. The people that were on it bought and sold. And that's when everything broke wide open. That's when commercialized. Up until then, it was strictly an information and communication network. There was no way you could do any business on the internet until
Except for
1996.
I was doing business on the internet. However, that was because I was connecting with people on bulletin boards and
Well,
asking dumb questions like,
yep,
does anybody know what this Oracle thing is? I heard about. So I have a funny story. I was actually hired by MCI
hmm
to I had a staff. I was part of a staffing firm to find somebody that was an expert in Oracle DB, right? And I'm
yep,
I'm like on these bulletin boards going, does anybody know what this Oracle DB? Nobody had ever heard of it. And some guy on a bulletin board was like, oh, dude, I know somebody that just started working on that. They've been working on this Oracle DB now for like almost a year. You have to contact him. And this was my very, very first placement. And it was in 1996. And I will always remember the name of this individual. His name was Sashi Joshi. And I found him through a friend that I had made virtually on a bulletin board who said, you got to go to this other bulletin board. Here's the number. You get a phone number, you
yeah.
dial in,
Oh yeah,
right? And
I
then
was
you
on
set up
all of
an
them.
account,
Yeah,
and I can't
hmm
remember the name of it, but I'm like, hey, new here, just got referred over by so-and-so. I was told that Sashi Joshi hangs out here. If anybody knows him. And then Sashi's like, yeah, I'm Sashi, some username handle that I had. He's like, what do you got? And I'm like, I'm working on this thing called the Oracle DB. Do you know anything about it? He's like, oh yeah, I'm working on that. Dude, send me your email. And we emailed, and he sent me his resume, and then I put it on my disk, and I walked it over to the office,
yeah, oh
and I
yeah,
put it in there, and I hired this guy for MCI on contract. They kept him for 3 years. He was so happy to make $150 an hour from this contract, which was way more
yeah.
than he was making at the time. And I'm not even going to tell you how much I made on the margin because it was sick. And he was
Good for
happy, and I
you.
was happy,
Good
and
for
he knew
you.
how much I was making. He's like, good for you, man.
Yeah,
I'm happy. I'm getting 150, and I was like, oh my god. So I broke all kinds of records with that. That was literally the beginning, and then that's when I realized in 1996. I know I was a little late for you, but 1996 when I realized somebody's got to do this. Nobody's
oh
doing
yeah.
this. Like actually recruiting on this thing.
Well, you're gonna
And that
love
was it.
this. I worked at Oracle for 3 months in 1990. I was brought in there by my mentor, Dave Law, the same guy I mentioned earlier.
He never heard of
And
Oracle DB. No, I'm just kidding.
well, I was the guy hired to staff the group at Oracle building the first distributed network databases. Nobody had ever done it before.
Cloud
And
computing.
I reported to Larry Ellison once a week. Larry Ellison himself, the guy, the multi-billionaire,
Oh yeah. Yep.
and talk about an intense meeting every week. It
Yeah,
was
I can
crazy.
imagine. Did you know Sashi
I built those
Joshi?
things. And I actually built I built a prototype sourcing system for him that never really got fully implemented because that was right when they had their first big crash. And the Oracle stock went from 26 and a quarter, I think, down to 4 7/8 or something when they got caught in an accounting scandal. He managed to save the company, but didn't build that project. All the people that I got hired for that project, he had all the offers sitting on his desk for like 4 months, and then he hired them. But anyway, I was working on that kind of stuff way back then, long before there was the web, and communicating with people via the internet. I borrowed all kinds of collegiate accounts and corporate accounts. My email address at Oracle back in 1990 was actually Bobbach, BOBBACH, at stealth.oracle.com. They gave me an account on their stealth development machine, in the 400 building. I was in building 400, office number 704, and yeah, so it goes way back with that kind of technology. I started out in operating systems. I got into network. I got into databases. I got into compilers. Got into all that deep tech stuff. And then, of course, the web came about, and the web changed everything because it made the internet really accessible to people. What the web actually did, Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who's credited with founding the web, really solved the biggest problem that they had at that time, which was that there were 3 different kinds of file formats. Macs had a file format, PCs had a format, IBM had a file format, and then actually there was a smattering of others, but they didn't really matter. All the file formats were incompatible. And so what happened is the web, he went back, because at that point, technical writers were using what's called SGML, which was advanced from HTML, which we all know and love. And what happened was, he went back and saw, hey, I can put everything in HTML format and make a browser window, or in this case, a web interface, internet interface, that would be able to read all of them and it would look the same. Genius, because all of a sudden everybody could access everything from everybody. And that's how the web came about. They took a step back in technology, deployed it universally, and created, the world we know today, essentially from that really brainstorming, brilliant key idea. And that's how that all came about. And
So
of course,
basically, I mean, it's like it's everything changed, but then everything didn't change. So it
right.
changed in that, like it all, the big disintermediation, where you were able to cut the middleman out in a lot of ways, and that led to a whole bunch. eBay, of course, being that basically the first example
The
of that.
commercial, yeah.
Yeah, the disintermediation of like you can go directly from the buyer to the seller. You don't no longer need that middle
Yeah.
person, middle multiple
Yeah.
middle layers, right?
Yeah.
And then sorry.
I was the recruiter. I was the recruiter in 95, 96 at a little startup company called eShop. They were the first guys to put a really functional web store on a modem, as you mentioned before. Really slow tech, super slow, way slower
Only
than
one
anybody could
customer
even.
at a time, wait in line.
Right, but they've managed to land 10 key clients. 1-800-Flowers, Spiegel Catalog at the time, a bunch of other companies. They were later acquired for $50 million, I understand, by Microsoft. And I actually helped put that deal together, but that's another story entirely for another time. But they were the first guys to actually put a store on the web. It was eShop. It was well documented. Will Poole was one of the founders. He later retired from Microsoft. Very successful venture capitalist.
So we
And
went from that experience to, in the 90s, an actual user interface.
Yeah.
And in the 2000s, the advent of like multi-layer social media.
Oh yeah, it all took off.
Instant messaging, and that's what led to the IRC, Internet Relay Chat, which led to Slack, or
Yep.
Skype, ICQ, if you remember that.
I
And
do.
somewhere in the middle there, somewhere along the way, probably I think it was in I want to say 1998 or 1997, 1998. There was this company called 6 Degrees that was a website that you could upload your contacts and connect with people that knew people that you knew. So the whole idea was the game of 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Right,
I know
exactly.
someone who knows
the Kevin Bacon thing, yeah.
Yeah. So 6 Degrees was the LinkedIn of the day. They really invented that concept. LinkedIn is not new. It just took a while for it to become commercially viable.
Reid Hoffman started it with some other guys in 2005. I was one of the very first people to get a LinkedIn account.
Yep. And that was, exemplary of what happened with this kind of web interface and what was starting to evolve. And back then, people had computers that had all this equipment on them, and were standalone machines. And now we're going back to essentially thin clients, where almost everything, if you think about it, we used to have all of our files on our computer. You needed a 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte drive up until very recently. But now, when I went and I bought my Mac Mini, I was like, my other computers all had big drives. This one only has a 512. You know why?
Yeah.
Because I don't even need all that.
Sure, it's all on the cloud.
Everything is on the cloud, right? Which means, and by the way, just cautionary word to anybody that's listening to me right now. Just because I have everything on the cloud doesn't mean that you should. And just because I have everything on the cloud doesn't mean I don't also have everything on my hard drive. So FYI, I have a very large hard drive that is solid state, and everything gets backed up here regularly. Because
same here. I got a 5 terabyte currently.
Yep, exactly. That's right. And they're actually really cheap. But this is the lesson here, folks. Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean you ain't paying rent. And
absolutely.
And you can get evicted, okay? For a million reasons. You can get evicted because the landlord went out of business, or you can get evicted because you stopped paying your bills, or you can get evicted because somebody broke in and stole your. So there's a lot of reasons not to have your stuff on the cloud exclusively. But for my daily stuff, everything is cloud based because I got a fiber optic connection, and I can do everything that I
That's
need.
that's because the bandwidth now for
Right,
communication via fiber,
via
gigabit
the
internet,
internet,
all those sorts of things is fast enough to make that work. Back in the old days, it
full
wasn't. It
circle.
was right.
Well, it
Nonetheless,
was, and
yeah,
then it wasn't. It was, and then we maxed it out. It was back when it was Vax VMS. And then we started adding all these other things, like, for example, people wanted to share pictures. And that's
right,
when it got to the point where you had a dial up connection that took 10 minutes to download a very low resolution picture of of your cousins or your
right.
grandkids or
Not to
whatever.
even mention video.
Well, yeah, it wasn't even, yeah, forget that. I mean, it took you
Yeah.
10 minutes to download an image, right?
Well, and
Um,
I
and
remember.
then it
Yeah.
came full circle. Now we have dark internet. Like, in other words, we have not the dark web. I'm talking about dark fiber connections that are not being used because
Right.
we don't even have the technology yet to utilize that bandwidth. But I
Yeah.
want to go back to recruiting. So it went from like chatting online to bulletin boards to chatting online on LinkedIn and all that. And now we have this behemoth that is LinkedIn that is essentially um, you know, disintermediating the recruiting industry again. And their big play, LinkedIn's big play, is we want to get rid of all recruiters. We want to eliminate everybody that's in recruiting. We want to have candidates go directly to the hiring managers. Don't be fooled, folks. If you're listening to this, the job that LinkedIn wants is your job. They want you to stop existing. Their ideal situation is where hiring managers go to LinkedIn and hire directly from LinkedIn. They do
It helps
not
to
want
also
you to
visualize
exist.
this is not just LinkedIn. LinkedIn, as we may recall, is a part of Microsoft. And Microsoft is driving this because the most profitable avenue for Microsoft at this point in time, you look at their annual reports, is Azure, which is their cloud system, competes with AWS and Google and
Yep.
all that. Excuse me, but also LinkedIn. LinkedIn is incredibly profitable for Microsoft, and
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
result of that, they're trying to maximize where can we grow this?
Where can
Well,
we grow this?
let's
And we grow it by disintermediating the middle person, which is you, the recruiter. So that brings me
exactly.
to the next thing that I wanted to bring back. So we go all the way from like literally the history of the web to the present state and how LinkedIn is doubling. You could I talk to talent leaders all the time, not just on the show, but in general as a consultant and as I'm out there. Folks, that I recently left my corporate job, so I don't have a square job anymore. So this is what I think about square jobs, by the way.
Yep.
Square jobs, yeah. So I'm back in the market as a consultant, and I speak to, even more now than before, and everybody complains about LinkedIn's doubling their price, doubling from
Yeah.
last year to this year. They're not doubling their price to make more money. They're doubling the price to get you out. They want to get rid of you. That's what they're doing. But let's talk about who else is trying to do that. So that brings us to AI, right? Recruiting tools in 2024, this year, and AI. Bob, you remember when Online Career Center or Hot Jobs or whatever came out, and they're like, we're replacing recruiters. Didn't
Nice
happen.
try. Yep.
Career Builder, we're replacing recruiters. Sorry, Monster bought OCC. We're replacing recruiters. Didn't happen. Where's Monster today? I don't know. Career Builder, we're replacing recruiters. Didn't happen, right? And LinkedIn, we're replacing recruiters. Still trying. And
Yep.
then, Seek Out and all these other companies, Hire Easy, Hire Tool, whatever you want to call it, Hire Now, they're all saying the same thing. We're replacing recruiters.
Eightfold, all those guys. Yeah.
How come I need you to tell me how come I haven't been replaced yet?
Well, it's very simple. The bottom line at this point in time, even though AI can write some of the code, and AI can do this, and AI can do that, and everything else, we're dealing with people at the companies, people that do the work.
So you tell me that before 1986, we were dealing with people, and after 2023, we're still dealing with people. So nothing changed.
Yeah. Nothing's changed.
So I'm not getting replaced.
No, nothing's changed in principle. Okay.
Right.
What happens is somebody's always trying to automate it or it's a constant game of hand slap. Remember this as a kid?
Slapjack.
It's a constant game of tech hand slap. And so what happens is somebody gets the bright idea that we can replace the human element in human interactions. And yeah, you can make it easier. Yeah, you can do certain functions. Yeah, you can do data storage. You can do data contact. You can do all those other kind of things. But the bottom line is there's a key word that you can't get rid of in the whole equation. It's called engagement. If you don't engage, nothing happens. And because you're hiring people, you're not hiring machines to do this stuff. When you're dealing with machine to machine, that's another factor.
There is no effing way that machines are going to replace engagement. They are going to enhance engagement,
Yes.
just like robots enhance manufacturing. But there is no way that all manufacturing is going to be completely unsupervised. That's how you end up with a pile up of accidents going on. I mean, there's always got to be some. What has happened is you have reduced the amount of mistakes, right?
Yes.
Toyota and Six Sigma, and the same thing probably is what's going to happen with this in recruiting, is that we're going to have the ability to very quickly interpret data, make sure that we're not making any errors. One of the things that's scary and very, very scary to regulators is that law that passed in New York, where they basically are making it essentially illegal for a machine, for an algorithm, to make determinations or pass judgment on qualification of candidates. Now, that is a preemptive strike against letting the machines take over.
Yes, but it's also happening all the time for the company's detriment. Because
here's the problem is I think that the solution isn't telling the machine or isn't shutting down the machine. I think the solution is figuring out, and I'm going to be talking about this, by the way, at the HRO data AI ethics.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear. Yeah,
I think the solution is not to shut down the algorithms, but to make sure that the algorithms' bias is known. And the problem isn't that they have bias. Everything has bias. Bias is okay. Bias is good. There's good bias and there's bad bias.
But disclose it.
You plan for it, right? If you know that the algorithm has bias, then you prevent the bias from having adverse impact. That's what you want. You don't want to prevent the bias because you don't want to prevent also the good bias that comes with it, which in this case, what I'm talking about is the error detection. So these machines should be assisting us. And that may mean that we are free. When people ask me, what's your prediction for recruiting and sourcing? Here's what I say. I say, we're going to become project managers. We're going to become architects. We're going to learn how to automate. And in particular, Bob, I think this is going to be very, very, very interesting for you. Your job and my job as sourcers, because where we came from, you came from the same, you were cut from the same cloth. Your solution in 1986 or whatever was, how can I get this thing to do something that it doesn't already do? And that is essentially a hacker, right? So you and I were born hackers.
People forget that the word hacker is not negative.
Not bad, no.
It was originally positive.
It's not a jailbreaker, right?
No.
So what we ended up doing is testing the search engine and putting in keywords and massaging them and adding this, taking this out. What if this happens? Guess what? That way of thinking is the exact same way of thinking that you need for prompt engineering.
Well, absolutely, because you have and the thing is that people have forgotten there's all kinds of theory and hypotheses and all kinds of stuff like that. But the bottom line, when the rubber meets the road, metaphorically speaking, it's all about delivering results. And this has always been an empirical function. Empirical is the word here. It's about tried and true. You tried it out. You tried a bunch of stuff that didn't work. It didn't kill you. It made you stronger. You figured out what didn't. Look at Thomas Edison. He figured. He said publicly, and it's all quoted all over the place. He discovered 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. 1,001, metaphorically speaking.
That's what we did.
There it is.
And that's what prompt engineering is. 1,000 ways to. Oops, that didn't work. That didn't come out. Don't expect look. Just like I used to say, don't expect to have a silver bullet. Don't expect to have a search string. People, I'm like, what's the best search string? There's no best search string. Come on. There's never going to be a best search string. And nowadays, maybe there's not even going to be a search string anymore. I mean, Boolean is dead. I've been talking about this for a while. There is
it's not. I don't think it's dead, Shally. It's kind
Boolean
of
is dead.
It's in a coma. I've been a big fan for years of extended Boolean, which of course the
Right,
old
right, right.
Alta Vista used to do. Now, of course, Bing
Those are
slipped
field
in.
search commands. That's not.
Yeah, exactly. But it's about being able to understand how to fully utilize the
Yes,
technology.
yes, yes.
Yeah, it's
That's it.
yeah,
That right
and so
there, that is it. Is about understanding the technology. And so that's what I'm telling you is the techniques that we use to understand how Google worked, whether or not you knew advanced syntax, that's what people think Boolean is. But Boolean is not that. Boolean, the basics of Boolean is this. I want to find this, but not that. You
right,
don't need that anymore. You know why? Because you don't need the and the or and the but. There's no more but. Buts are gone. What
yeah.
we need now is a very specific series of prompts, prompt engineering to get to what we want. And it's essentially evolving those multiple. Now you have to set it up. You have to start here, go here, and set it up. And then once you get to what you want,
It's iterative. It's
then
iterative.
that
You have to
that's
do it
right.
step by step. That didn't work.
Bingo.
Okay, we'll go this way. It's all about
100%.
that iterative process, which is basically it's the empirical process. That's the way it works. It's the way life has always worked for all of humanity's history. Is figuring out what worked empirically.
Test. What do you call it? Trial and error, right?
Yeah,
The scientific method of hypotheses, testing, failure, hypotheses, testing, theory, testing, failure, theory, testing, law, right? Well,
right.
guess what? There was no sourcing law, and now there's no ChatGPT law. We're still in the hypothesis
Yeah,
testing.
and people also don't realize that they haven't read the fine print. For instance, the original ChatGPT that was released only utilized data through 2021, so it's already out of date. 3.5, I think they bumped it up to the middle of 2023.
Yeah.
GPT-4 is more current. 5 is going to be even more current, and so on and so forth. And there's all the other competitors to that. Obviously, Microsoft's got all of their stuff as well. They recently renamed their whole process. Google's got all kinds of things in the wings coming up. I'm sure Amazon does as well. Everybody's fighting for that space, right? Because it's going to be basically the future of being able to figure out how to do stuff.
Okay. So here's a question for you. All right.
Yeah.
First of all, let's start with the basic understanding that all of these generative AI models all have the same common crawl. Literally, it's called common crawl. So the baseline data is the same for all of these open large language models. The large language model is based on the large language of common crawl. Okay. They're all applied differently, and ChatGPT 4, the reason it's a lot more powerful than ChatGPT 3, again, this is baseline, is because there's more computers involved, so more processing power.
And more current data. Yeah.
That's a big evolution, is the ability to have current data on top of but the large language model was the beginning. So now, all of that said, let's assume that most of the big players that have their own AI assistant are thinking things differently, right? So here's a multiple choice question for you.
Okay.
Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini? Which one's the best?
Depends what you're doing. I think Gemini is going to be
large language. Thank you. As a large language model that answers questions like, what's wrong with this paragraph? Spell check this. The basic answering questions. Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini.
Well, it used to be. It was originally ChatGPT, then Copilot slotted. Claude was kind of on the outskirts, and I think Gemini is probably the best available today.
It's best
available today. But again, it's a constant hand slap. So now, today, as we're talking right now on Friday the 16th of February 2024, in the afternoon ET, I think it's Gemini. But their interface isn't as commonly used as ChatGPT or Copilot. So it's constant. You have to be able to use them all, because they're all going to basically hand slap each other depending upon what you're trying to do. Yeah.
That's my browser, and I've got a little folder for AI where I've got all of those. For those of you that are not able to, including myself, not able to see that pixelated, horrible thing that I just showed you, that is Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and Perplexity. Perplexity is kind of like
I use Perplexity on my phone. I use them all, and
they all have different. You're right. They all have different. So what is Copilot best for? They all,
I
you're right, they're all
actually
good.
I actually use it the least, although I suppose it's probably better for finding certain kinds of people contextually. ChatGPT is kind of general purpose. Claude, it seems to me, went more toward the graphics and video side of things, perhaps. To me, for the uses that I do, I'm just getting deep into the new Gemini, and I'm liking it a lot. It's got some really interesting features and stuff. I mean, the bottom line is you have to approach a task or a search or an assignment. You have to know what the end result that you want is,
What is
and
it
then
that
you
you want?
figure out what's the
Result.
best tool du jour, or for this particular hour even, is going to deliver me the best results, or you do them all. I mean,
I test
back
them. I regularly test all four. Yeah, when I have
right
a question or a
back back
task.
back, back before the let's call it the LinkedIn slap of 2024. Um, I relied a lot on just Google search, Google X-ray of LinkedIn, LinkedIn itself. The search engines in LinkedIn, to me, are abysmal. They're horrible. They're really inefficient. Why? Because they want you to subscribe to LinkedIn Recruiter Full, not just Lite and or Sales Navigator. But
Mhm.
even those search engines don't do a complete job, which is why you still had to do a Google X-ray search to get to the real meat of things, hiding in the corners
Right.
and crevices that their
Well,
own engine.
search engines
Yeah.
are yeah, yeah. That's a good point. But search engines are really looking for you're looking for pages on the internet where
Yeah.
these AIs are really not looking for a page as much as they're
Nope.
looking for an aggregate of like all what are all the best pages, etc. So yeah, just supporting your argument there.
Right. And also, very often we have to operate as sourcing people on the sourcing side, especially as detectives. We have to approach it like a detective, where you get a scrap of data from here and a scrap of data from there.
Yeah,
And you're able to
and I
in
think that's
fact,
a really good use of these items.
right. And you
Scrapping.
have to be able to coagulate and then synthesize all these remote and apparently disparate data points. I'm a big fan of a bunch of different TV shows and movies and things over the years that have featured that kind of thinking. There was a brilliant series back in 2008, 2009 called Rubicon. It only lasted one
Oh yeah,
season, but it
that's
was
okay.
about a CIA think tank that was so remote the CIA didn't know about it except for a dozen people, whose job it was to put together remote disparate data points and figure things out. And I
Connect
won't, I
dots.
won't, I won't spoil the surprise. Watch the series. There's 12 episodes, I think, 10 or 12, and it was brilliant. And a lot of the other shows, like recently, there was a great movie on Netflix called Lupin, Lupin for those that don't speak French.
Yep.
And it was about a guy who was a master thief and master of disguise, based apparently on original characters. But he
Yep.
put together scraps of data and stuff to figure things out and to stay constantly one or two steps ahead of everybody.
Yeah, things like,
And
three-dimensional chessboard. Yeah, it's a really good show.
oh, absolutely,
I love that
absolutely.
show. It's good
And yeah,
acting. Very good acting.
and chess, of course, is really valuable. That
Yeah.
I deterred from a chess master path when I was in high school. I realized it was not the best use of my time overall. I still play a pretty mean game of chess, but I'm not at the level that the pros do it. But they're really focused on that kind of play,
Yeah, that's all.
and
Yeah.
stuff. But the idea is to keep the open mind about thinking, be able to not only see similarities but differences, little things, discrepancies, little points that pop out and stuff like that, and be able to think in such a way that you can synthesize all these pieces of data and put
That's a really
together
good
a
way of
picture.
putting that's the advantage that these models have. Copilot and ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, they all take the same common crawl, but and they add the new stuff, but they all think about it
Right.
slightly different and come up with a different answer. They all come up with a different answer, even if it's the exact same. But you give them a paragraph, the exact same paragraph, and say, "How would you improve this paragraph?" and give it to all four of them, and you get four different answers. And
Absolutely.
your writing style might be different, but it's not just for writing; it's also for finding those patterns. But we're getting pretty short on time, and what I wanted to do is there's two things that I wanted to kind of circle back to. One of them is, you said at the very beginning that, and also in the middle, that we're not going to get displaced because this is about engagement, right? This is what
No,
you've been talking
the
about.
number of recruiters will probably drop drastically because a lot of
Yes,
people were
that's
just
right.
they
But I'm
just, they were
talking
just
about
put they were
recruiting
just
being
pushing
replaced.
right. They were pushing paper. Yeah.
Right. Yes. So the industry is not going to get, the job of recruiting isn't going to go the way of the dodo bird.
No,
But um, I do think that retaining that personal touch is going to become even more important. And so
it's vital. It's absolutely
yes,
mission critical.
but here's my creepy question. The creepy
Okay.
question of the week by Shally Stagro. Um, Apple Vision Pro. How
Yeah.
creepy is that?
It's at once super incredibly amazing and ultra super creepy at the same time. It's both sides of the coin.
Yeah, it
How
is.
how are you going to determine how you're going to use it? You're going to use your superpowers for good or for evil?
Oh
That's
man, I don't know, man. I mean, just the idea of people walking around, going to the store and going out to a restaurant wearing an octopus stuck to their face,
oh
and
yeah,
then you see
it's
their
coming.
eyes through the glass, but they look like these robotic eyes,
Oh
and
yeah,
they just look very weird. I saw somebody wearing them, and I'm like, oh, do you know that uncanny valley from animation and from like robotics? It's the bottom of the uncanny valley. There's like, you go
yeah.
uncanny valley just drops, and then it's the bottom of it. You see somebody wearing that, and you're just like, oh. And then I did a meeting with somebody that was on FaceTime wearing them, right?
Oh yeah,
And so what you see, because they don't have a monitor, they don't have a webcam, they have this, you know,
thing.
this
Yeah,
parasite stuck to their face.
appendage. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what you see is like a somewhat virtual representation, and it is the absolute. It's bad enough. Listen, I love talking to you, man, but we've had like maybe 3 conversations face to face. Talking to you virtually, even though you're really good at making eye contact with the camera, and I'm really good at making eye contact with the camera, the reality is that we both know it's not eye contact, and it still feels somewhat alien. Well, do that with somebody that's got this Apple Vision Pro thing
Oh,
in,
I know. It's just
and I just
bizarre.
want to turn the video off. I would like, you
Yeah,
know what? Let's just make this a phone call because this is disturbing.
yeah.
That kind of personal touch. So I don't know, man. I wanted to get your thoughts since you've seen it all from, from the beginning till now. Is there even a remote possibility that people are going to be okay with that sort of level of creep factor?
Well, you know what? People are going to get used to it. It's going to be, it's happening. We can't stop it. We don't want to stop it actually, but it's got its place. And the problem is, like every other technology, it tends to get completely overused at the expense of the
The human touch.
underlying reality. So it's always coming back to ground zero, if you would, back to the basics. All these kind of things are going to be enhancements, but some people it's going to take over their lives. I mean, there's people right now who don't
Enhancement,
have
not replacement. I think I
who
just
don't
heard the
have
point you were
intimate
saying.
relationships with a
Hmm.
human being in real time in the same space and time. They have it via machines or via Slack or Google Meet or whatever. Whatever you pick your poison as far as the technologies go, but it's not a replacement for the real human interaction. So as long as humans are around, there's going to be that need for an actual real
Yeah,
time
right.
connection, face to face, handshake to handshake, et cetera, to basically make it happen. And
That's
so
right.
that can't be lost. There's all the other stuff. It
I
has a
hope it
place.
doesn't. I hope it
I
doesn't. I
well,
get that we're going through an evolution and we'll have to
well,
accept it. And,
like
you know,
every other adopting technology, Shally, it's going to be a pendulum. It's going to be too much and too little and too
yeah.
much, too little. Eventually, it settles
I'm
out.
getting seasick, man. I'm
Yeah,
getting seasick. I gotta
yeah,
tell you. So, social networking architecture (SNA). I was a big subscriber to the
yeah,
theories, and was wrote about the Dunbar number
yeah,
and all that. Now, those theories it's blown apart because technology has essentially made it possible for us to far exceed the Dunbar number.
yeah,
So, for those of you that are wondering, the limit of social interaction. So, a human, according to this social networking architecture study, and the scientist by the last name of Dunbar, he's posited that the limit of human interaction was you couldn't possibly maintain relationships with more than 250 people. In other words, within your community of people that your friends, your family, intimate relationships, friends, acquaintances, everything from your baker to your dry cleaner, you couldn't possibly in your head hold relationships where you have knowledge of more than 250 people. But that has been exceeded by some individuals and by technology. And that's what LinkedIn and tools like Facebook and Twitter are able to do, because you can then hold more relationships. Now, here's what I'm thinking. These tools, virtual meetings, Slack, the Apple Vision Pro are going to help us extend that Dunbar number even further.
Sure.
But I think what's going to evolve as a repercussion, or here's my prediction, as the counter revolution to that, is that we are going to have two levels of relationships. We're going to have a level of relationships.
We already have multiple ones, Shally.
No, I know that, but I'm saying deeper than that. I'm going to say there's people that you communicate with only on in person, face to face, and via text messaging, maybe. Yep. But never via email, never via, that's going to be your very inner sanctum. Right. And then there's going to be everybody else. And the everybody else is going to be Snapchat, Instagram, Apple Vision Pro, the whole thing. But right now, I don't think that there's a lot of that inner sanctum yet. People are still kind of trying to bridge the gap. So I had a conversation with my friend recently, Garrick Chen, and he said, you know how I can tell if somebody's not my friend? I said, no. How can you tell if somebody's not your friend? He said, if at the end of the conversation they say, have a nice weekend, they're not my friend. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. He says, here's why. He says, if they say have a nice weekend, that means that they know they're not going to talk to you until who knows when, and it's going to be some other long distance, it could be a week, it could be a month, they're just saying goodbye, like have a nice weekend. But if they're really your friend, there's a very distinct, clear possibility that they may talk to you before the weekend. So they don't say a very, courteous, like, have a nice weekend. They just say, okay, talk to you later, or okay, bye, or just, see you later. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah. Come to think of it, a lot of my conversations end with have a nice weekend. and I want less of my conversations to be have a nice weekend. I want more of my conversations, or maybe
absolutely
fewer, I don't know.
Well, a lot of my friends.
So Bob,
a lot
have
of my
a nice
friends, weekend.
No, I'm just
kidding. A lot of my friends, a lot of my friends speak French. So the French have had for thousands of years that I know of. They have two terms. They have à bientôt, which basically translates as until later, and au revoir, which means goodbye. And so it's with close friends, it's always à bientôt. It's until later. I don't know when. It could be in an hour. It could be in a week. It could be in a month. It could be in a year. I mean, I have very good friends of mine that are very, very close to me. I haven't seen in person for 2 to 3 years, but we talk all the time. And when we do talk, when we do visit in person, it's amazing, So there's that level. And then there's people that I talk to all the time online, and, they're just, second, third tier friends, associates, almost. And so it's going to be murky before it gets clear again. But I agree with you in principle. Absolutely. There's the close inner circle. There's the next circle, so on and so forth and whatever. And it's about being able to work within those constraints and with people, and be able to communicate with them in a way that they're comfortable with, that makes sense to them, maybe even open their eyes a little bit to something new, all those sorts of things, and the essence of the human experience to me, it contains the idea of being able to communicate and relate. I mean, no, the old saying, no man, no person is an island. We're not. Imagine if you were the only human on the planet. It'd be a really weird scenario, wouldn't it? Or even in the same town, or by yourself in a whatever. I remember during the pandemic, the Rolling Stones released a song called "Living in a Ghost Town," and it was a scary video to me at first. It's like, whoa, this is really a little too dystopian. Also, Jeff Beck and Johnny Depp did a song. They did John Lennon's "Isolation." And so they did a really great version, so amazing music. But the principle, the premise behind it, Lennon was he felt alone, and he wrote this song called "Isolation." And the idea is to not be that way. The idea is we're happiest and healthiest when we're relating to people live in real time, and it matters, and you can affect somebody's life positively, and they can do the same for you.
And that's not Apple Vision Pro.
I do.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot
That's kind of
missing
what I
from
was
that.
getting at.
Yep, there's a lot missing from that, and people
Exactly.
are going to
Look, I'm not
they'll
saying
pay the
don't use
price.
it. I actually wanted to buy
No,
one. If I
it's
had
a tool,
$5,000 burning a
Shally.
hole in my pocket, it's
Yeah,
probably the first thing I would buy. But
Shally.
um,
It's a
I don't
tool.
think I would replace every. I still think that there are people that I would say, hey, let's go grab lunch, or let's go have a brewski or whatever. And I'm not going to be
Yep.
bringing my Apple Vision Pro while I'm hanging out with
No.
them. So yeah, that's I guess what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. You're
Man,
we're on the same page.
Yeah, I think so. So last time I dropped a doozy on you, and I said, "Who should be on our show next?"
Yep.
Were you prepared for that for this time? Do you have a recommendation for my next guest?
Well,
I already
I
sprung that on you, so I'll let you off the hook
yeah,
as a return visitor if you don't
I
have one.
I would get one of the sourcing guys. I'd get Chris Ackerman Carver or Mike Batman Cohen, or get Arena on.
Chris, what? Chris
Carver.
All right.
Or get Arena.
I'll try to reach out to Chris.
Yeah.
One is enough. I'll try to reach out to Chris and see if we can get him, and then of course
tell him I sent you.
You're right. Yeah, that's right. That's the only way he'll pay attention to me. And
there you go.
The other question is, what do you want to, what do you want to leave people thinking about? What do you want them to? What thought-provoking thought do you have?
I want them to think about how can I really take the whole high-tech, high-touch thing to the next level today for 2024 and beyond, which is what tools can I use to enhance my life, my relationships, my experience, and help others do the same. Because we're trying to improve the condition of humanity. I would hope, at least I certainly am. There might be some people out there who aren't, but I'm sure we are, and I am.
That's fine. We let them do their own thing.
Yeah. So how can we enhance life, the human experience, life, love, happiness, all those sorts of fun things, and what tools can we use to help make that happen?
What modern tools can we use?
Even better. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It requires some deep thinking, because I certainly have spent enough time on it. Yeah. I'm sure others will too.
That is the entire point, right? I fashioned myself a thought provoker. I don't like the title of thought leader at all, because I usually ask more questions than I have answers, as you are witness to.
I get slammed by my friends all the time, because I ask at least 10 to 20 times more questions than any group of people that I ever know. That's how I know what I know. And the funny thing is with life, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Shit, that's right.
Absolutely.
That is absolutely right.
Isn't that the truth?
Which is why I keep asking questions, because I want to remedy that, but it ain't happening anytime soon. So
interesting paradox.
It is. All right. Well, folks, I was going to say have a nice weekend, but I can't do that anymore. So what I'm going to say is thank you for coming. We will see you here live 2 Fridays from now. I am skipping next Friday to go pay my respects to a dear friend that passed away, and it's their funeral. So it is a long day of ceremonies and all that. So I'm not going to be online next week, but the week after that, we do have a show with a very special guest named Luke Doubler, and you might have heard of him before. If not, look him up. So we'll see you here 2 Fridays from now with Luke Doubler. Until then, be kind to yourself.
A bientôt. Until later.
Ciao. Hasta luego. Bye-bye.